Good morning to everyone here and everyone watching at home, listening. And it's our great pleasure to have Charlie Hogg here. Charlie's the director of the Brahma Kumaris in Australia. And we're very, very fortunate to have him here. And a wonderful topic, which is overcoming negative emotions. So it's something we all have to deal with, and we couldn't have a better person to help us to know how to cope with these negative emotions and how to let them go. So we're all very interested, Charlie, to hear your suggestions and your experience. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sally. It's always so lovely to be here in Lura, in the Blue Mountains. And there's also a few of us in the room here, which is lovely. Sometimes it's just an empty room when we do the webinars. And I think, as Sally was saying, that the last year has been an incredibly challenging year for virtually everybody. And I think for everybody, a lot of unfinished business, can we call them negative emotions, have emerged. Sometimes they sort of bubble up and sometimes they come with incredible force. And I've often been amazed that with all our education, all our life experience, we often really have no strategies as to how to sort of manage these powerful feelings that emerge inside of us. And when we look at our history, there seems to be three main things which we have in our history. One is religion, the second is psychology, and the third is spirituality. And you know, when I left school, I wandered around the world for some years, and I lived in religious communities, all types of religious communities, which was a wonderful experience, and I learned to love all the religions dearly. But I also found that when negative emotions emerge, there wasn't really a strategy except to suppress them and push them down. And as a result, I think that many of us, when our powerful emotions, our powerful feelings come, our subconscious or conscious strategy is just to push them down because they don't look nice. And that's why I think about 150 years ago or longer, psychology was born really with the aim to be more honest about the dark side of the self. We all have that dark side. It's the shadow in the human spirit. And psychology began to acknowledge that all of us do have negative emotions. And as wonderful as that was to be more open about it, to really discover why I feel the way I do, often I think what happens with psychology, we begin to indulge in so much self-analysis as to why I am the way I am. So at least I begin to know why these emotions are there and the origins of them, but often not much power to really transform them or overcome them. And that's where I think spirituality has a wonderful part, because I think the role of spirituality is also to really acknowledge my negative emotions, that they are there, but I don't put so much energy into this sort of constant analysis of them, but I put energy into really transforming them. And many years ago, I used to teach meditation at Long Bay Jail, which is Sydney's main jail. And once I was invited to run a meditation course in a special prison. They'd set up a special prison for a small group of prisoners with the aim to try to reform their behavior. And so if they were good prisoners, they got points. And if they broke the rules, they lost their points. And if they lost quite a few points, then they were sent back into the main prison once again. And so it was really in their interest to, be good, because they got privileges like television and things like this. So when I went along there was only 15 prisoners in this prison. And all 15 came for meditation. I thought, isn't that wonderful? They're all interested in meditation. And then I found out they got points for coming. The main reason they were there was just to collect their points. But what I remember was one prisoner, we were talking very openly, and one prisoner shared his heart about his anger, about his temper. And he was a big man, a huge man, and a very articulate man, really intelligent. And he said, I get so angry, I completely lose control of myself, and I killed somebody. And then he said, I came into jail and the same thing happened, and I killed a warder. He was quite famous in the New South Wales prison system. But he was just expressing how sometimes emotion is so powerful, he loses complete control of his inner faculties. And perhaps our emotions aren't that strong, but we all know the power of emotion and how it's instant. It instantly seems to bulldoze the intellect, which is the faculty of reason. And the emotion takes over, and we say things, we do things which we later, wish we hadn't done. And so I think we all experience these powerful feelings, as Sally was saying, but some emotions are very visible. They're what I call the explosive style of emotion, anger, aggression, etc. But most are invisible. Fear, hurt, depression, grief, guilt, all these sort of feelings are invisible, but I would say equally powerful, or even more powerful than the visible emotions. And probably the pinnacle emotion that all of us experience in many different ways is anger. And spiritually, they say anger is on 3 levels. You have the overt anger, which is, speaking or even getting physically violent, speaking negatively. Then there's the emotional anger, which is the irritation, the annoyance, the frustration. I think we all know those feelings. But then there's that silent anger where I just avoid somebody. Actually giving someone the silent treatment, avoiding somebody, is actually, I would say, a form of anger also. And so anger is an incredibly powerful emotion. And when we start to explore these negative emotions, we realize they have an amazing effect on all parts of my life, a negative effect. There's a lot of research into the emotion of anger. And when we get angry, adrenaline and cortisol just go right through my system instantly. And when that begins to happen, it can, create increased blood sugar, blood pressure, which hardens my arteries. So anger, when I'm regularly angry, it can actually create heart disease. This is actual research. There's also research that says that when we regularly get angry, it kills cells. There's cell atrophy in the brain, and it creates memory loss. And I even remember one of my friends in the UK telling me that there's been some research that when we remove anger in the form of a grudge, it can relieve back pain. That's incredible, isn't it? So our emotions really are deeply connected to, even our physiology and our physical health. So that's one thing. But I would say even another aspect of this too is my relationships. And we all know the effect of relationships. And the founder of the Brahma Kumaris was Brahma Baba. And he founded the Brahma Kumaris in what is now Pakistan in the 1930s. And he was a person just so deeply on the spiritual journey. And he would often say that when you get angry, you lose control in 1 second, but it will affect your life for a minimum of 6 months. Because what happens if, for instance, if I just had a tantrum now on this webinar, if I threw a tantrum, I can guarantee the one thing you'd remember about this webinar was my tantrum. And it's like we have a little digital camera here in the third eye, go click, 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 and it's stored on the hard disk. And so every time I would come in front of you, for a long time, you're thinking, is he going to get angry? So like loss of control for a few seconds, people record it in their memory. You have to behave peacefully 100 times at least to wipe that from their memory. And so we all know actually how devastating anger can be in relationships. And I think every human being could share some powerful experiences of that. But mostly it affects me. And when we get angry with somebody, when I see someone really, really angry, sometimes I think it's scary. It's scary, isn't it? Because the face and the eyes, it's really sort of quite frightening on one level. But in one way, I feel they're just saying, help me, help me. I've lost control of my inner world and my emotions. The only way I can express this absolute loss of inner power is this venting, this incredible frustration. And the real effect of anger on the self is deep down, I lose respect for me. If I see myself paying out on the people I love, how do I feel deep down? Yes, at that time, I might feel I want to really tell them what I think or that sort of thing. But deep down, in my quieter moments, I don't like who I am. And so anger, this very visible and powerful emotion, begins to affect, my health, my relationships with others, and my own relationship with myself, which is really the seed of everything. And I think that all of us in life, I always am amazed just how well educated we are about the world outside. We know so much. Everyone today is just has so much information. And yet we seem so uneducated about the world inside, because when anger comes, I have no idea really how to work with it, how to manage it. And so when powerful emotions come, what do? Usually our main strategy has been to suppress. I suppress my anger, I suppress my hurt, I suppress my grief. I keep pushing it down, but it comes out in different ways. That really quick reactive nature, that short, sharp tongue. And as we know, if I suppress emotion over a long time, a lot of data says it will affect my physical health and well-being. So sometimes we suppress or sometimes we deny. And I think one of the amazing lessons for myself on my spiritual journey is just how we've built in all these deep mechanisms of self-denial where I can't really see who I am because it's too uncomfortable. And so, even I know in one of our centers, we used to have a program called the 11th Step, which many of you will know the 12-step program, which is a wonderful program to deal with addiction. But the 11th step is conscious contact with God. And a group used to come to one of our centers and they would meditate. But they were telling me once the first step on the 12 steps is to admit I have a problem with drinking or whatever it may be. And that's the hardest step, to actually admit to myself that actually it's me who becomes angry. And I can remember as a student, I used to work in restaurants, like a lot of students, part-time work. And I remember once I was in a restaurant and one of the chefs got really angry And he picked up pots and pans and was throwing them, and we're all ducking and weaving. And when he cooled down, I went to him and I said, are you okay? He said, what do you mean? Oh, I said, you looked a little bit upset. I mean, he was furious. No, I'm fine. Like nothing had happened. And I remember later talked to a psychologist friend. He said there's a known thing of psychology that we can do things like that and then we block it. We completely block it out of my memory that I've behaved. So sometimes we suppress, sometimes we deny, sometimes we design my life to avoid situations that trigger my emotions. So if there's certain people that trigger feelings in me, I sort of avoid them. And then perhaps I feel I'm okay, but actually I've designed my life to really sidestep the things which really challenge me. Or even sometimes I point the finger of blame. And that's probably the most common strategy in life today. You're the one making me feel hurt, feel upset, feel angry, feel. It's you and your behavior. And who of us haven't been down that route? I think we've all played that game at some point of time. But spiritually, blame is the ultimate ignorance. Blame is the ultimate ignorance. It's like I give my power to you, so you have the power over my emotions. If you behave well, my emotions will be fine. But if you don't behave well, my emotions are going to come into upheaval. Even in the corporate world, maybe 40, 50 years ago, realizing that people build up, we pent up emotion inside. I know in Japan, I read, I think in America too, that they used to have a place in corporate America where they'd have punching bags, So you'd sort of go down, take off your beautiful pinstripe suit, then go boom, 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 and then put back on your old coat and go back to the office again, a temporary relief of the pent-up emotion inside. But I think what I love about spirituality really says that, ultimately I am responsible for who I am as a person and how I feel. And I've got to take that responsibility and the realization that, they are my emotions. And maybe for a long time, I've been suppressing, denying, avoiding, blaming, doing all sorts of strategies to work with these uncomfortable feelings. But ultimately, the spiritual journey is to be kind but honest with myself, very gentle and kind but honest, that they are my emotions. And that's why I would say really the first step in really beginning to overcome or even work with negative emotions is to begin to understand them and take responsibility. And I think that, often I think of emotion like a volcano. Once I was in Central America in Costa Rica. It's a wonderful little country, a fascinating country, because Costa Rica has never been at war with its neighbors, and it doesn't have an army. And their philosophy is if you have an army, you're going to use it. And they're actually the first peace university in the world was created in Costa Rica. I went to it. It's a university that studies peace. Quite an amazing country. And while I was there, I went up to an active volcano. I walked up to the lip. And when I looked down, there was all this water inside, frothing and bubbling. It was like an iridescent. It looked so sort of, like negative emotions, really fiery. And to me, it was sort of a great metaphor that often, we explode with anger, but anger's like the top of the emotional tree. What's been feeding? What's been feeding that anger? Often it's fear that you may see through my facade and see that I'm not so confident. I'm not as good as I look. that, I'm not so adequate, or I'm even inadequate in some areas. So I have that fear that people will see through and see that. Or I have a grief, a deep grief, that somewhere I lost this perfect love. Somewhere there's a memory, I've lost that, and there's this deep grief, which I believe sits in the hearts of most human beings. Or even the hurt I carry, that my real needs in life haven't been met, to be loved, to be valued, to be respected. They haven't happened, and sometimes I just carry this hurt. And so sometimes when the fear, the hurt, the pain, the sorrow emerges, the explosion happens, but often it's been bubbling, beneath the surface for a long, long time. And that's why I think the first step to overcoming emotions is really to become like vulnerable with myself. And that first law of spirituality that really says, I am responsible for how I feel. They are my emotions. And unless I really own that, yes, it's me who gets angry, it's me that's feeling hurt, it's my emotion, I don't think a healing process can begin. So that first step is really to do with my relationship with me and taking responsibility that these feelings, yes, there's no doubt people are catalysts. There's no doubt. The way I look at relationships today is that all other people do is trigger what's in me. They become instruments to trigger feelings. And the one with wisdom looks at the self, but the one who doesn't looks at you and blames you. But the one with wisdom knows that you're an instrument. You're like a messenger to show me what's still sitting within me, what's still my karmic story, what is still my unfinished business. And a really deep spiritual person won't keep putting it back on the other. It's because of your behavior. It's because of who you are. I'm feeling this. But they will take that responsibility. The second step to really begin to overcome these emotions is to really know who I am. And what I feel is that these emotions are really children of a dysfunctional relationship with myself. We know in sociology that when parents don't get on, if mum and dad have conflict, they're always fighting, it has an influence on the child. If I'm always fighting with myself, if I'm very hypercritical, negative, I'm putting myself down, I'm blaming myself, I'm criticizing myself, that dysfunction creates a negative relationship with myself. And these children are the product of this unhealthy relationship with me. And one of them is depression. And some years ago, I went on a speaking tour with a man in Sydney who wrote a book about his battle with depression. He was, as they say, very successful. That means in this world, you've got a high position, you make money. That's what this world terms as success. I feel it's more to be happy myself, but he was, and he had a good family life, everything was okay, but deep down he felt completely depressed. And he said that the World Health Organization says 1 in 4 of us is suffering from depression. Isn't that amazing? I would say it's much more, actually. And in psychology, depression, they say, is a form of anger, that my needs haven't been met, that I haven't been loved or valued or respected as I feel I should have. And so there's this like deep sadness in the core of the soul. But in spirituality, depression is like a mourning for the loss of my true identity. I'm living my life, but who am I really? Who am I? And this is, I think, absolutely fundamental to everything. And the more I go on in my life, I really feel unless the relationship with the self heals, nothing is going to really change in life. The seed, when the seed of my thinking, my self-perception is that I'm a temporary form with a whole lot of labels, that seed will grow a whole tree of false emotion. That seed of falsehood. If the whole foundation of my thinking is false, then what's it going to grow? I honestly believe the seed of all stress is this falsehood that we're all brought up with, is that you are a body. Your name is this. This is your gender. This is your culture. This is your religion. And it's a temporary identity. But the seed of pure feelings, of love, of peace, of happiness comes when I sow the seed of my eternal identity. And the absolute wonder of the self, that I am a soul, the spirit, the consciousness, the Atma. The Atma means three things: I, the living, the dweller in the costume. So this point of consciousness, the soul exists, but it has no physical size or form. And it sits in the front of the brain. And the soul enters the womb when the quickening begins in the womb. And in the womb, often they say the soul remembers its past life and promises, I want to do it better this time. But when I'm born, I forget and I take on the identity of the temporary form once again. But when I start to really practice who I am, that I am the eternal soul, immortal, non-physical energy, that is starting to sow the seed, and that is the seed of peace. And the more I create peace, then there's less likelihood that the deep habit of anger will take over. And this is why we construct a day where we sit in meditation in the morning, we create peace, the fragrance of peace in my mind, and the whole idea is that peace flows through my day. Now, all of us have habits of anger, habits of negative emotion. And the reason for this is that when we go deep into the soul is really an overname for three aspects of consciousness. The mind, which is the receiver of all the information through the sense organs. So I see, I hear. It all is shown on the screen of the mind, like the screen up here. So all the data from your senses comes up onto the screen of the mind. The intellect is assessing all that data. So the intellect is the one assessing and making a decision. And then I make a decision, I do an action, I say something, and every action is imprinted on my subconscious. So if you do something and I get annoyed once, twice, 10 times, 20 times, I create the habit of anger. So what happens is that we wake up in the morning and we all really, I believe the intent of every human being is good. Really, I believe most of us have this really high intent. I want to be a loving, kind, good human being. So I wake up and think that, and then 3 minutes later, someone does something and I'm, this habit, because it's a habit in my subconscious to feel sad. A little thing happens, to feel depressed, to feel angry. And this is why some of our negative emotions have an incredible power over us. Because I would say they're not just from childhood, but from many lifetimes I've created subconscious habits. And this is why on this spiritual journey, some habits change quickly, some take time, and some of us feel is too powerful. I feel like a slave to my own weakness. I sometimes have a determination, but this fear, this anger, this hurt, this grief keeps coming back time and time again. And so at least we're starting to get a picture why sometimes these negative emotions can be so incredibly strong, but equally, my positive feelings of peace and love are equally strong. And really, when I sow the seed of being a soul, I start to tap into the power of my positive emotions. But I would say the next step is to experience true love. And another incredibly powerful emotion is grief. And there was a famous American psychiatrist, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was a diminutive little psychiatrist from Los Angeles, an incredible woman who believed that every human being holds this sort of deep well of grief inside. And when we lose something, it seems to open that well of grief. I might even just, I don't know, there's a little bit of a conflict and a loss of a friendship, but the feeling of sadness and grief is so overpowering. And she used to feel the reason why sometimes the grief is so great, especially if we lose a loved one, is because she felt the original grief was the loss of love of God, God's love. That we've known perfect love. We've known that sense of belonging. We've known that closeness, and somewhere we lost it. And so even if I lose a friendship, I lose a pet, I lose something, it just opens this deep wound of grief inside. And I think there's a lot of merit in that, because in my experience, on this journey for a long time, that the most powerful healing thing, all of us have negative emotions, all of us have lack of self-respect, all of us have all this stuff. But the deepest healing begins when I reestablish a relationship with God. There's some magic in that nothing else really has. And when I began to meditate, I was told that I was a soul. That made a lot of sense to me. The soul is this tiny point, and I learned how to sort of let go all the labels and just become a soul, sitting lightly in the forehead, detached from my body. But then I learned that the Supreme Soul is a real living being, a real living soul like me. And I don't need to worship or pray, but have a natural, loving relationship. To have relationship is in the DNA of the human spirit. It's absolutely natural. What is so powerful about this relationship is that it's permanent. This relationship will never go, whereas every other relationship will go. I often feel we search for true love. It's in the nature of being a human being. We're always looking, because we have this deep memory of that original love of God. We search for true love. We invest our heart in relationships. We give everything in our families. We do, you think how much you sacrifice for others, but there's that huge human dilemma. No relationship is permanent. No relationship is permanent, whether it's time, whether it's change, whether it's conflict, whether it's separation, whether it's death. And this has created this incredible fear and insecurity inside all of us. Powerful emotions, because we have been taught we're a temporary body, and you are a temporary body too. And these temporary bodies will go at some point. But as I, the soul who's permanent, establish a relationship with my lover, the Supreme Soul who's permanent, it's like it reestablishes strength, and it resolves so much of that powerful emotion of fear. You know, they say there's two prime emotions in life, fear and love. And, you know, and most other emotions are sort of extensions of those two emotions. All of us know how absolutely paralyzing fear can be, but all of us also know how life-transforming love can be. And really, a lot of fear comes from dependence or attachment. When I attach my heart to a person or to a possession or to a role or responsibility, I immediately build fear. And the more I attach my heart, I just build this fear into my life. And I can't even enjoy that relationship sometimes because I'm so afraid of losing it and that sort of sense of loneliness or insecurity coming. And that's why spirituality reconnects me with my truth, because what spirituality really begins to say is that you always exist. And the only thing that's permanent is change, you know. There will, as we know, the only thing that's permanent is change. And so this is when I really begin to realize that I'm eternal, the soul is immortal, God is eternal, and I really establish this relationship. And I would really emphasize relationship because it's natural. And what I feel about spirituality these days is that the most natural thing for all of us is to fall in love. It's recorded in us. We don't have to be taught. It's recorded in us. And when we fall in love with the divine, we understand how attractive the Supreme Soul is. So pure, so simple, and real. It's a real relationship with a living being. Then automatically I connect, I remember. And the more I remember, I connect with a being that's pure, my mind becomes elevated and I automatically begin to change. And almost naturally, the old emotions have less power over me. And this is why really the way I've been thinking about this in recent times is that in the Brahma Kumaris, you know, these days I hardly use the word meditate because I think people just feel it's so hard. It's hard work to sort of try to elevate your consciousness. But what we learn here is to remember. It's very deep, actually, because whenever you remember, you connect. And whenever you connect, you're influenced by what you connect with. And when you're influenced, you have a feeling inside. So if you connect with somebody and you're having a difficult time, you're in conflict with that person, the instant you connect, you're influenced by that negative emotion. You feel heavy, peaceless, disturbed inside. The logic here is as I go about my life, as I meet people, go to work, fulfill my life's responsibilities, I remember my lover, the beloved, the Supreme Soul. It's not just a belief, it's a real relationship with a real soul. But this soul does not have a body. It's a different style of relationship. And that's what I've got to get used to. And that takes time and patience. But when I do, you are plugging into a source of inner strength like no other. And dealing with this very changeable and uncertain world, I feel stable because my mind is connected there rather than to all this stuff changing around me. And finally, I just want to talk about one other powerful emotion because we want a little bit of time for questions as well. And that is the emotion of jealousy. And I feel that most of us don't recognize when we're under the influence of jealousy. And I think often jealousy is an emotion that has an effect on relationships as much as almost any other emotion. A negative effect on my relationships. Jealousy is an emotion in anticipation of losing something I value. I value my relationship with you. A third party comes, and that party may threaten my friendship with you. I value my role in an organization or whatever. Someone else comes who's capable. I feel threatened. And so, without, I think often consciously, what happens, the process of jealousy, is I compare myself with others. I do it unconsciously often. And if others appear wiser or more popular or more capable, they may threaten something I value in my life. And unconsciously, I begin to oppose them. And in my conscious mind, I have so much rationale as to why this person's not a good person. I'm so clever. I've actually rationalized it to myself, why I oppose them, why I don't trust them. And yet, actually, it's my own jealousy, which I'm really under the influence of. And it's a powerful emotion that can be so destructive in my relationships with others. So incredibly destructive. And I think that when I really look deeply, how much influence has jealousy played in my life? And often I think jealousy is the seed of so many, breakdowns in relationships with others. Anyway, powerful emotions are a huge story for all of us. And in just a moment, we're going to have some questions. But just before we have questions, I think that we're living in a time of huge change. And it's triggering all our feelings. And I feel whenever I'm sort of sharing these days, it's so important to put a regular practice into life. Often with spirituality, we love it. We read the books, we love to talk about it because that's the nature of the way we learn these days. It's more an intellectual thing. But spiritual learning is a completely different style of learning. Spiritual learning is really transformation. And the learning we do at university or whatever, we just know so much information. We know so much about so many things. All of us are quite articulate on so many different subjects. Spiritual learning is just taking one idea. Who am I? And going deeper and deeper and deeper, unpacking the eternal truth of who I am. I am a soul. I'm a point of consciousness. I can never die. I will always exist. I'm non-physical. I carry my story from my past, which is overlaying and influencing my present. So my habitual emotional patterns of the past are overlaying and affecting my relationships now. The reason we follow a spiritual life is we don't really battle with my negative emotion. But the more I become soul-conscious, I actually start to withdraw the power of peace. And the more I withdraw the power of peace, the less my anger, my frustration, all these things have power over me. The more I have a relationship, a loving relationship with God, then the less fear and grief and these sorts of emotions, they start to have less power over me. I don't really fight them consciously, but I actually develop the awareness of who I am and the awareness of God, and the old power of negative emotion loses its strength over me. It does take time. It wouldn't be fair to say that it just happens overnight. We know because some of them are very deep. And this is why really, if we practice on a regular basis, I think that's the message of our time. And what that really means is that not that I just meditate morning and night, because often I find people meditate, they really feel good. And then as soon as they stop meditating, their thinking goes back to their old way. But actually, what we do here is all throughout the day, as I fulfill my life's responsibilities, I'm practicing soul consciousness and practicing remembering, practicing the connection. The more I practice, it's like I step back into my self-respect. I step back into that inner stability. And it's really, I think, during this time and looking at our world, it's so unpredictable, it's so uncertain. So I can't rely on the world out there. It's not going to fulfill my desires or needs, but I can establish a stable world inside. It is possible. It just needs some practice. So I've been going on for quite a long time now, and so I think a few questions have come in the chat box. So you'll hear a disembodied voice of Sri Ram coming through. So he will speak the question. And
Om Shanti. Thank you, Baiji. This is a very beautiful talk from you, and many comments.
If you're not sure what Baiji means, it means brother. So
thank you for that. So many beautiful comments we got and some questions. The question, do certain food affect emotion?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting question. And I would say I'm definitely not an expert in this. But, once I was in the headquarters of the Brahma Kumaris in India, and there's a woman there who was there, and she's actually from India, but she's a colonel in the US Army. She's a surgeon, actually. And she was talking a lot about the effect of diet on the mind. And she really feels that extreme things, a little bit of everything is okay, but too much of anything is not okay. But a lot will say that, too much sugar and all this sort of thing can make us quite hyperactive. But I would say diet has a minimal influence compared to my subconscious habits that I create. And the language we use when I perform an action and it's recorded in my subconscious, it's called a sanskara. So we literally have millions of these subconscious sanskaras which go to make up my unique personality. And sometimes I think that the soul is like an iceberg. An iceberg, 10% is above the water and 90% below. So you can see we show a little bit of ourselves, but most of ourselves we hide. It's not seen, Our emotions, our feelings, our real stuff, we hide beneath the surface. And so that is really what has the major influence. But there's no doubt they do say that eating a red meat diet and this sort of thing creates aggression, anger, and these sorts of things. So that's why in this whole journey towards a more peaceful life where we're non-violent, we tread lightly in this earth, to be vegetarian is really an act of love for the world and love for our fellow beings in this world, and it does have an effect on my emotions positively. Thank you.
Thank you for that. In your talk, you talked about for the depression, when we get that, or psychology says, in past, some things which are not has been done as I wanted. So where from this comes that I want and that expectation or something is not fulfilled as I want, but where from that comes which particular things to be happen like this or not, how we can overcome from that, my what I want to be or what I want to be seen from others.
I think it's because originally we were a self-contained system. So just my thoughts gave me peace, my thoughts gave me love, my thoughts made me happy. But as I lost soul power, I start to look to you to give me love, to this to give to me peace, for this to make me happy. So I became dependent on the outcome. I want you to behave in a certain way so that that makes me happy. And when you don't behave in a certain way, that makes me unhappy. So I blame you. So I've become so dependent on things external. It is so deep in the human spirit to blame others. Even so many years on the spiritual journey, people are caught up in the falsehood that you are the problem. It's how, I mean, I know, I just am amazed sometimes how these thoughts come back, but I'm deceiving myself when I do that. And that's where really what is happening when I know who I am and I have a relationship with God, I realize whatever needs I want, I have control over inside. Because I don't have control over your behavior. I don't have control over the outcome of the world economy or whatever's happening. And that's why people feel so powerless today. And they're so sensitive to the economy and the workplace and the family and people. We're so sensitive because we have so many desires that these external things have to be a certain way to fulfill my needs. I want you to behave in this way. I want this to happen. And we all know when it doesn't happen, how do you feel? Do you feel angry, resentful, hurt, frustrated, disappointed? And you know, people with high expectations are often disappointed. And no one can ever live up to their expectations. And they really feel human beings are like this and this, but they don't realize it's their own expectations that have made them permanently disappointed in. Other people will never live up to their expectations. The wonderful thing I've learned in the Brahma Kumaris is the power of detachment. And that really means that I live in this world, I'm so engaged with people, with life, fully, 110% involved, but I'm attached in that way. So it means that if you behave well, it's okay, but if you don't, what can I do? Detachment is a deep state of wisdom, but it's misunderstood. Detachment in English sounds cut off, disconnected, aloof. No. Detachment actually is the foundation of being loving. A detached person can love all people because they're detached from their behaviors and their moods. But it's a very high state. And you know what I've noticed is when people really fall in love with God, the Supreme Soul, they become naturally detached. And they're just naturally uninfluenced by all the ups and downs of life. It's a natural thing. It's not that I'm thinking, I shouldn't be affected. They are naturally not affected by a lot of the stuff because their mind is engaged elsewhere.
Wow, quite wise. Thank you, Vaiji. One more question coming. How to control emotional jealousy, like competitiveness in school, college, and office environment?
Yeah, I mean, jealousy is a huge thing in our world, and I think a lot bigger than we often feel. I think it's the whole foundation of it is a lack of self-respect. And because my relationship with myself has really become dysfunctional, and I believe personally the reason we have this crazy world is one reason, that the relationship of me with me the first relationship in life of 7.8 billion human beings is so dysfunctional, it creates the mad world we're living in, you know. And until we heal this first relationship, it's not going to change. So what happens is, because I lack so much self-respect and I see someone who's clever, who's talented, who's popular, I feel threatened, and it's not conscious. I compare and I feel threatened. And unless I really rebuild my self-value, and another way of describing the spiritual journey, what is the spiritual journey? To rebuild and heal this relationship with myself, you know, to rebuild this dysfunctional relationship and make it a good relationship. And then I have self-respect. I don't feel threatened. I live in my value. And when I have self-respect and I accept myself, I can accept others. Not only accept, I enjoy it when they're successful. I enjoy it when they do well. I think, wow, isn't that great? But if I don't have self-respect, I feel threatened by, I compare, I feel threatened. And then this jealousy kicks in, and it's the most horrible feeling, isn't it? This feeling of burning with, you know, just that person's name. Whenever anyone says, oh, so-and-so, you just burn inside. And, you know, all these feelings that jealousy creates. Really, I have to rebuild my self-respect. And that is a lifetime journey. That's why we come to study here. And interestingly, the more you create pure thoughts, you have pure feelings, you speak positive words, you do pure actions, you will like who you are. You'll develop self-respect.
Thank you. One sister is asking, what more methods you have for us to stop suppressing bad feelings?
It's very deep. And to be frank, I think when people come onto the spiritual journey is one of transformation. But our habit is to suppress. So even when we start our spiritual journey, on the surface, we learn new ideas and they're acceptable. And I do change, but it's not so deep. And I still sometimes suppress some of my own stuff. And this is why sometimes on this spiritual journey, I've seen after 5 or 10 years, a lot of rubbish comes up, and then people start to think this doesn't work. But it's because my old habit of to suppress my stuff has been there. And when it comes out, I think I'm going backwards. I think, oh gosh, I thought I've been practicing meditation for 10 years and look what's happening. I feel I'm worse than I was before, but you're not. You're actually almost got enough power to really look at this stuff and practice. So I think I have to really be vulnerable with myself. And one of the great wisdoms of spirituality is to be like an honest observer of the self. An honest observer of the self. And that is an objectivity. And it's very, very difficult. Why? Because most people can't see any good in themselves. If I'm an honest observer of myself, I'll see all this beauty. I'll see all these good qualities. And once I have that platform, I can then be more objective about my weakness. If I only see my weakness, I feel hopeless. And that hopelessness just makes me want to suppress it again, push it. It's too much, I'll deny it. I'll keep denying it even more. But an honest observer will know my value and also know my weakness, but I don't feel hopeless in seeing my weakness. The reason I'm here is to develop strategies to transform myself and change my weaknesses. So maybe just one more question, because it's 11 and we don't want to keep everyone too long. Then we'll just have a few minutes of meditation.
Thank you. So one soul is asking, You talked about the detachment, but our detachment sometimes affects others. So how does that affect our karma?
It's because in trying to be detached, we become aloof. We're not detached. True detachment is to be extremely loving. You know, you can only really, to be truly detached, you have to be totally loving. To be truly loving, you have to be totally detached. Because you can love people in a good mood and love people in a bad mood. If I'm detached in the wrong way, yeah, people won't be happy because I'm sort of, I'm not coping, so I cut off, I disconnect, I withdraw. I may be physically present with people, but mentally I withdraw. And a lot of people do that because they're not coping, they sort of mentally withdraw. That's not detachment at all. That's not healthy. The detachment we're talking about is to be extremely loving, extremely caring, extremely close, very kind, good communication, but uninfluenced by. I'm uninfluenced by people's moods, their behaviors, their attitudes, their opinions, because most of us just dance to the tune of other people. If their mood's good, my mood's good. If their mood's bad, we just drink it all in, and then I blame you. Because of you, I'm feeling this. This is the culture. This is the human condition of today. But the spiritual story says, no, I'm the master. So if you're in a bad mood and I stay in a good mood, actually my mood can often lift you out of your bad mood. That's really being detached is to be very close, very loving, and very caring. I'm very considerate, but I'm not drinking in your stuff. It doesn't help people. Sometimes we feel we have to identify with people's sorrow to help them. No, you know, they often say that when a little baby is really sick, a nurse can be more effective than a mother because the mother's so emotionally caught up, and a nurse will just do what she has to do. This sort of thing, you know. The nurse is still being loving and caring, but it has an objectivity as well. Okay, so as we do, just like to invite everybody to enjoy a few moments of meditation. I was saying I don't use the word meditation much because I think if you use the word remembering, it makes it much more easy. It feels easier. And we often call this easy Raja Yoga. Why? All I have to do is remember who I am and remember who I belong to. It's that simple. But where I plug into creates the quality of my life. If I plug into the past, if I plug into conflict in relationships, if I plug into the future and the worry, what's going to be my state of mind? But if I plug into who I am and I plug into the one relationship that's permanent, I really settle my inner world. So I will just suggest a few thoughts. A part of life today is powerful emotions. That can influence you in a split second. But equally powerful are my original qualities. My natural and original state is peace. and to open a deep world of inner peace. I just need to know and experience who I am. Visualize yourself as an eternal spark of life energy, sitting in the center of the forehead, in the front of the brain. I am eternal. My body is temporary. I am immortal. My body is mortal. I am non-physical. My body is physical. As I begin to reconnect with my true self, experience myself as a bodiless soul, I taste the sweetness of true peace. And in this soul conscious state, I come in front of the one relationship that's permanent. The relationship with the divine, with God. I see a radiant jewel of light, an unlimited ocean of love. And I just remember, connect. And it's like I live stream that divine love back into the core of my being. This pure love, this pure acceptance helps me settle inside. Makes me feel I belong. I feel secure. And all the fear of change begins to go. I feel I have what I need. And I let go the fear of loss. The more I live my day-to-day life in the awareness of who I am and who I belong to. I emerge all these original feelings of peace, of love, of happiness, of power. And the effect of my old emotions begins to diminish. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlie. That was just so informative and so deep. And I think out of any talk I've listened to, I've learnt the most from this, because it's something that affects us every day. So thank you so much, Charlie.
Sally, as always, thanks for having me. It's lovely to be with you. Thank you.
Come again soon.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, and good morning. And thanks, everyone in the room, too. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.